Hi, it's Alaska Granny. As preppers, we know we need to have a well-stocked pantry. We need to have food that can last the longest so that we can have the things we need if there's some big apocalyptic event, which it doesn't have to be like the end of the world as we know it. It could just be a day-to-day emergency. We need to get a meal on the table for our family. If you're looking at what is the absolute basic minimum that a person would need for an entire year to have the most basic foods and enough, then you should look to the literature from the LDS or the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have been the experts on long-term food storage since they came into being, simply because in the beginning, the early days of their church, they had very hard times and very many people went hungry. So they took it as part of their mission statement, I guess, to make sure that everyone is prepared for an uncertain future. I'm not sure if that's exactly the reason, but there are a lot of reasons why even today we would want to have food to make sure that we have enough. So if we look at what they claim is the amount of food that one adult would need to have enough food for 1 year, even if that is all you had, then these are the basic things that they say you could have to keep you alive. And that's the whole point of having enough food, is to keep us alive. Is it going to be the biggest, best amount of food ever that you ever ate? No, but these are the absolute basics, the minimum required so that you could survive. And the first item is 400 pounds of grain. And you might think that's more than a pound of grain a day. What am I even going to do with all that? Where am I going to store it? But don't think about it as just you must have, say, wheat, and you need to be able to figure out how to crack the wheat and grind the wheat and turn it into bread. Look at all of the foods that are actually grains: wheat, flour, oatmeal, corn, rice, pastas, quinoa. Those are all types of foods. You can have a variety, so you don't just have 400 pounds of one food and you don't know what exactly to even do with it. And if there's some of those foods that you wouldn't eat, or you don't know how to use them, learn how to use them, or store what you do enjoy eating and you do know how to cook. I know for me in the early days when I wanted to really figure out what are the basics, what could I have so that I could make sure my family had enough, and they used to say you need 400 pounds of wheat. Well, I don't want to figure out how to crack wheat, grind wheat, and bake it into bread. That to me is not a solution for how am I going to keep myself alive for a year. But I don't mind if I can have some flour, some rice, some oatmeal. I could make rice and oatmeal every day for the next year and be satisfied with that and not ever have to worry about cracking the grain. But it's all up to you and what you feel comfortable doing. I have since added some wheat into my long-term food storage stockpile, but I'm kind of the opinion like my son-in-law is. I hope my grandchildren throw it away when I die, and then it wasn't a big enough emergency that I actually needed it, which means life turned out great. I like his attitude. After grains, you want to have beans, 60 pounds of beans. Now, just like other foods that you can get from the LDS Church, you can get beans that are already sealed up in a can. You can buy them they come in like a box of 6 cans, and they're not very expensive, and they ship to your house for practically free. And so you can buy those that way so that you have a lot of beans. You can buy big bags of beans and fill them up into buckets yourself, or even a little at a time. Buy a bag of beans. Different types of beans. There's all different kinds. And don't forget, split peas and lentils are also beans because they give you the protein that you need. Find the beans that you enjoy eating, you know how to cook, and you're willing to have in your prepper pantry, and see if you can get your stockpile up to 60 pounds of beans. And remember, the better you store your food, the longer it's going to last. That's why it's nice when you can buy the food in the number 10 cans. It's already sealed up. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to try to find Mylar bags, oxygen absorbers, buckets. You don't have to do any of that. You can buy the food already sealed up, and that can be comforting because then you know that it's going to last. You can put it away, set it and forget it. But then if you do want it, it's in a small enough size container that you can open it up and fill up your regular pantry sized canister, and you can rotate that food. That's one of the things that I like about it. I don't want to open up 50 pounds of something at a time. to put into my pantry so that I'm rotating and using the food. I tend to find that the buckets that are so huge that I put away, I don't want to rotate them because they're just too big and cumbersome, and then I have to figure out what to do with all of that, where you can just get one of the cans or a smaller package that you stored yourself, maybe even in a clean canning jar, and you can put that into your working pantry. So there are different ways to do it. It doesn't have to be just in a bucket or a can. You can have your dried foods in formats that fit your desires and your needs. After the rice and beans, you need to have powdered milk. Now, 16 pounds is a lot of powdered milk if you don't drink milk, which I don't, and I don't like powdered milk, but I do like the Nido Fortificata. So I found a powdered milk that I like, that I'm willing to use and incorporate into my recipes. So that's the one that I choose. This one doesn't last the longest haul like the powdered non-fat dried milk. That can last much longer because all of the fat is taken out of it and the flavor too. And this one, I like it, so I'm willing to rotate it more to make sure that I still have enough milk on hand for my own needs and for those of my family. So that's part of it, is you need to find the foods that you like, that you're willing to eat, and then you need to have them in the amounts that are going to keep you satisfied that you have the foods that you need. After milk, you need 10 quarts of oil. I like olive oil and canola oil. It's my choice. I'm going to choose to store the oils that I like to use, and you should do the same thing. Then you need to figure out that you have to rotate these faster though than 30 years. You can't put oil away and it'll last forever. It's only going to last a few years. And if you couldn't possibly use 8 quarts in a couple of years, then don't store so much. Store the amount that you know you could use it. I'm not even sure what I would be supposed to do with 8 quarts because I don't even know what I would do with 400 pounds of some of this other food. But I'm trying to figure it out. And that's one of the reasons why you need to look at what you like to eat and what makes sense for you. Some of it doesn't make sense, then that's not what you should do. But this is still the basic plan of what can you have that you could survive for an entire year if that's all you did have to eat. Next, you need 60 pounds of sugar or honey. And think about it though, maple syrup is also a forever food, and that's a sweetener. So that's not on their list, but it is an option for a sweetener that you could put away forever. Now, 60 pounds is a lot of sugar to put away, but it's still inexpensive. It's something that you can buy, just like I did, in the number 10 cans from the LDS Church, or you can buy it in a bag at the grocery store, put it away a little at a time. You can buy small bags if you have a small amount of money, store it into an airtight container and put on the lid. You could also store it into a big Mylar bag and then seal it up and keep it in a bucket. The sugar and the honey are forever foods if they're stored properly, and so that's comforting to know that if you got those foods that you could put them away and they could last nearly forever. Then the last food is salt. 8 pounds of salt. And you might be saying, that's not good for you. You're not supposed to have so much salt. People have too much salt in their diet. But if this is what you're eating, you're not getting any of the processed foods that are already full of sodium. You're going to be cooking from scratch, and so salt is nutritionally necessary for us to have a healthy body. And so yes, you need to store some salt, and it's very cheap. So go ahead and get some. I've also been to the Dollar Tree and been able to find the pink Himalayan salt, and I like that. I found it for $1, and that to me is a great deal. But also make sure that you have some iodized salt. Iodine is also a necessary nutrient in your diet, and if you're not eating seafood, then you need to be sure you're getting that from some other source. And so that's one reason that salt is iodized, to help people stay healthy without having to think about it. Then the last thing on the basic list of foods that'll keep you alive for a year, 2 weeks worth of water. It's not practical to store a year's worth of water into the typical family's home, but you can start off with the minimum of 1 gallon per day per person and start with at least 2 weeks worth. Then you can put away your 14 gallons per person. But I wouldn't count on the 1 gallon of water helping you do more than prepare your food to drink. 1 gallon a day is not a reasonable amount to think that you could also have it for cooking and cleaning. That's going to be enough for some food preparation and for staying hydrated yourself. But if you're going to need other water for the typical daily things that we use water for, you're going to have more. The good thing about needing water for flushing the toilet, rinsing out your clothes, washing the dishes, it doesn't have to be the perfectly clean drinking water like we would need for cooking and drinking. You can fill up some other containers and store them under your sink, and then you have extra water if you need to rinse off a dish or clean something up. You'll have a little bit of extra water. That's what I do. I fill up leftover containers and I place them under the sinks in my house, so then if I need to pour some into the toilet, help rinse something out in the sink, I have extra water. For some reason the water stops running. So it's hard to imagine having this much food, and then that was my problem. I wouldn't know what to do with these foods. I had to make food storage work for me, for foods that I knew how to use, that I could have on hand, that I could feed my family if I needed to. And that's where I've gone to a lot of the prepackaged foods, the canned foods that are in your pantry that you can take out and open and eat, because they can last a long time. And then I don't have to try to figure out, what do I do with a barrel of wheat? How am I going to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And maybe that works for you and you know how to make bread and pancakes and biscuits, but that's not something that I reasonably could accomplish or that I even want to do. But I can reach in and get some pancake mix, some biscuit mixes, some pilot bread crackers that'll last forever, and lots of rice and pasta and oatmeal, because those are foods that I'm familiar with eating. I know how to make them quickly and easily, and then I don't have to try to figure out a whole new lifestyle if something happens. I can continue to make meals from foods that are familiar, and so that's how you want to make food storage work for you. It's your puzzle that you're putting together to meet your needs. There is no one right answer. It's what works for you. So think of it as completing the pieces of your puzzle to put your food storage together so that it means the most, makes the most sense for you. That's how I look at it. So if you have any tips and tricks, any suggestions that we can learn about food storage, leave it in the comments so that we can learn from each other. There's so much to know, and it could be getting that there's less time to learn it. But we still want to try to do the best we can. We want every day to be as smooth as possible. That's why we're preppers. If you enjoyed my video, I hope you'll share it with someone else you think might like it. Please subscribe to the Alaska Granny channel.